Did Vancouver real estate just hit the top? Hello, everyone, and welcome back to this week's episode of the Vancouver Life Real Estate Podcast. I'm joined here with Dan. Before we get started, please scroll down and hit that subscribe button if you're watching on YouTube. Otherwise, Dan, let's jump into it. It sounds like Vancouver real estate is hitting a peak in terms of where the market's at right now. But I think before we get into that, maybe let's just talk about some of the indicators. We'll look at some pre-sales, kind of set the tone for what the interesting piece is here at the end. But to start off, let's look at pre-sales. A month ago, we talked about how the Belvedere development in Surrey sold out in 5 days last month. We are seeing Q5 pre-sales here sold in 2 hours and 35 minutes.
Yep, the Q5 pre-sale, also in Surrey, located in Wally, sold out in 2.5 hours just last week.
Oh my God.
Sorry. Is that not reminiscent of what we went through in 2016, 2017?
Interesting. Yeah.
And so I think what we're seeing there, of course, is an escalation, right? We saw pre-sales used to sit on the market for a while during most of last year. Then things started to escalate and they would sell out in a month. Then Belvedere kind of took the reins, sold out in 5 days. And now we're seeing it happen in just a matter of hours.
Wow.
Yeah, for a bit of context there, North Surrey there, Wally, this specific pre-sale is just 6-story wood frame studio to 1, 2, and 3 beds.
What they're building all day out there.
So, I guess an attractive price point. And certainly I could imagine, because I've seen it, happen a lot in 2016 and 17. I think we're seeing investors move into that type of product.
Yeah, for sure. I think it might also speak to some of the stats here. I think, again, investors, when they buy into pre-sales, they can kind of lock in their investment over the next sort of 3 to 4 years, right? And in doing so, I think that they might be seeing a little softening in the market here in the near term. And I think, we're seeing some supply jump, not just in the marketplace, but also in terms of new home construction.
I think these kind of sales data are getting all the developers excited about thinking, yeah, okay, it's time to release our product. Because as we know, last year when things were slower, developers were pulling back, right? They didn't want to put their new product to market because if they don't hit their sales targets, they don't get financing, right? And so in a slower market, it's a little bit scarier to want to release new product. But in a heavy and heated market like we're in right now, and hearing about these, sellouts in hours or even a week, it gets pretty enticing for the developers to say, okay, now's the time.
So, I mean, to give you guys some context, BMO economist Shelley, I can never pronounce her last name, Koshik. She actually marked the new construction data as the strongest single month in modern history. I mean, admitting that goes back to 1990, but still, that's the largest gain we've seen in 30 years. And what numbers did that look like, Dan?
Yeah, if you can believe it, there was 335,000 units released last month.
Wow.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, when you consider the fact that we're looking to pull in 500,000 new permanent residences at the end of the year, that's a good target. That's a lot of units to be released in any given month.
Yeah, it's and that's great.
Looks like
right?
a tap.
Yeah. Now, of course, I believe the term is annualized. So I guess that's, the percentage did jump almost 22% last month to reach what should be 335 annualized units, 335,000. But again, those are the kind of numbers we need to see based on current inventory and immigration targets, like you mentioned. So I think, while that number sounds exciting, it's not sustainable. I think my guess here is that we are seeing developers that held back last year that had that approval in place, essentially their building permits in place, say, okay, yeah, go, let's release it now.
but then the market softened, and as a result, they may have held back a year or two before. So this isn't like the announcement of 335,000 new projects. It's annualized. It was likely um, a mixture of new and projects that were held back from developers from the years before, and now they've all decided to release and start building.
That's exactly it. And, understandably, most of these units are being released in Ontario and BC, followed up by the prairies. Meanwhile, we see Quebec and Atlantic Canada, they're actually seeing declines in home building activity right now.
Interesting. Interesting. Um, yeah, it kind of speaks to um, the current state of the market too. I mean, certainly this is the kind of news that you'll read about, and I think in 2 or 3 months. I mean, we're hearing about it now, but it's not going to be headline news. And by the time it is, the market will have slowed down, I think, to some, or at least stabilized. I think we're starting to see the start of price stabilization. And that's just, I think, this is a response, I think, to the crazy hot market that we've just gone through, and likely looking forward to for the next couple of years, understanding where Canada's immigration targets are. But being said, it can't sustain at the pace it's been going, right? So,
I think it's pretty typical of, the demand is there, and the developers are finally trying to feed into that supply as much as possible.
right.
At an interesting time too, when I'm sure construction costs have never been higher. We're hitting record construction starts.
Mm.
So, don't expect these prices to not emulate that.
Yeah, for sure. Well, I mean, they're dealing with the cost now, so it'll be translated into the future price point.
That's right. So there you go. We got a big pre-sale fever going on right now, which again it always lags resale, but it is pretty much at a fever pitch when we're seeing these kind of numbers get hit. It's 2.5 hour sellouts. This weekend, there's a pre-sale in Squamish that we've been tracking called Redbridge. We've got some clients that are interested in it. That I feel is going to have a 1 day sellout as well. It's only 93 units for the first phase, and we'll definitely report back on that one next week
It's
when we
also
know.
it's also waterfront too, which helps.
Yeah, and an area again with extremely low vacancy, so going to be
Yeah.
attractive to both end users and investors.
Yeah, it's interesting when you hear, you talked about other markets actually seeing a retraction in their construction, or declines, I should say. Um, it does make you think that regional areas that had demand prior to, or stronger regional areas like Squamish, places like that, will continue to see, um, or may not correct or price stabilize at the same time as the rest of the market, right? There are these outlying micro communities, not necessarily micro, um, communities that are performing at a higher level than regional averages as well. So that's to be taken into account.
Absolutely, great point. So let's shift gears just a little bit here and kind of put to rest the idea that a deferral cliff will ever exist. Um, Understandably, a few people, when mortgages were given the opportunity or a chance to be deferred for 6-ish months, a lot of people thought, oh, well, when that term ends, it's all going to collapse. Well, as we know, basically the exact opposite has happened, and we've seen these record sales happen throughout the year. But what about for the people who didn't want to move and quite liked their home? Well, a lot of them, again, having in essence excess money, like a lot of people did this year because of things like not being able to spend it on going out or travel or whatnot, thanks to government stimulus and thanks to things like the stock market and crypto doing so well. Canada ended up seeing homeowners pay an extra $34 billion into advanced mortgage payments.
Extra.
Extra, right? This is
It,
just their regular payments. This was on top of the regular payments.
I'm laughing because it sounds like such a Canadian thing to do.
It kind of does, right? And
Or such a Canadian fiscal thing to do.
yeah. I mean, for example, here, for a bit of context, so the first 3 months of 2020, the average savings rate for Canadians was about 7.5%. By the time that hit the second quarter of 2020, so well into the pandemic, that skyrocketed or jumped up to 28% savings rate.
Whew.
Yeah. And at the end of the year, it averaged out just under 13%.
That's
But
good. They
again,
started to put some of that money back into the economy.
yeah,
So
that's right. So they're about 3 times the average savings last year.
I
So
just want
again,
to slow clap Canadians for that, because like that's an impressive thing, to go through a pandemic, to prioritize your payments, to prioritize how your money is made, spent, and earned, and then to help support the system that we're all a part of. That makes me proud to read those stats.
yeah, yeah, no, I agree. That's a nice way of framing it, Ryan. And again, so instead of a deferral cliff, we have record savings and record mortgage pay down.
Wow.
Yeah, that's what Canadians chose to do. Um, and that really leads us and segues us into our next topic here, which is mortgage-free Vancouverites, right? People wanting to pay down their homes, and we are now sitting at, just in Vancouver, just GVRD here, $373 billion worth of mortgage-free real estate.
Oh my God.
That's a lot of people sitting on a lot of equity with no payments to worry about, right? So, talks of interest rates rising, doesn't matter if you don't have a mortgage.
Yeah.
And those
Yeah.
people, 373 billion worth of properties, that's not a concern to them.
Well, and this is just in the regional area, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I mean, if you think about that for a second, and the common, I guess, argument to affordability in Vancouver is that people don't make enough to support the price of real estate. And generally speaking, that's true. But when you look at $373 billion in mortgage free real estate, and you wonder about funds going from, father to son, or mother to daughter, or something to that effect, to buy more real estate, that's where this transfer is happening. And that's how the purchases are still being floated. And, this doesn't surprise me at all. I mean, the number is staggering. And the fact that that's also mortgage free, I mean, that doesn't include equity that has still got mortgages in it, because there's still a large number of money there as well.
Yeah, good point, right? This number does not include people that, let's say, have only 5% remaining on their mortgage, or 10%,
Yeah.
or whatever that number is.
Wow.
Um, Furthermore, to this 373 billion, looking back, this is up 173% from just 10 years ago. So the amount of wealth
Holy
in mortgage-free homes is increasing at like 17%
percent.
annualized.
But the rate of inflation, Dan, hasn't hit 2 yet.
That's true. What else can we say about this? Oh, I mean, yeah, like Ryan just touched on, a lot of these sort of gifted down payments are coming from the boomers, and understandably so, because of that 373 billion that we're talking about, 55% of those mortgage-free homes are owned by the boomers, right? So that's age 55 to 75.
Wow. Wow.
About a quarter, 23%, is age 75 and older. But if another interesting stat here, 22% of these mortgage-free homes that we're talking about are owned by people under the age of 55.
Wow. Who are they?
Some smart investors potentially
Yeah, no
investing in
kidding.
themselves.
I would say so, yeah. Um, Anyhow, wow. Um, I guess no real news here on the Fed. They hold their interest rate here, again, near 0%, continuing to buy about $120 billion worth of bonds per month. But that's actually a little lower than it was at the height, acknowledging economy growth, but no hints of slowing bond buying, let alone raising rates. Um,
Yeah, the one key point here too, though, is they are kind of acknowledging that inflation is running hot. They're saying inflation is running at about 2.5% in the States right now.
that happened quick, eh?
It did, and I think, unlike Canada, I think they're being a little bit more honest about it,
Mm.
to be quite frank. And they're saying, look, yeah, we are running hot. The reason they're going to continue or maintain an above average inflation rate and continue their quantitative easing, they're really pursuing their employment targets. So they want to see the US hit pre-pandemic levels of employment before they slow down their QE and before they start to consider raising interest rates.
Interesting. Yeah, I was watching Kevin O'Leary last night, actually, and yeah, there was something about 9 million workers that they have to repurpose right now, and that's coming largely from the airline and retail sectors. And once they find how to repurpose these people back into the economy and that they can get working again, I think then you'll start to see some more movement. But that's a lot of where the focus is right now, is what do we do with a lot of these people that have now lost their jobs? I mean, we've gone through a huge digitization in the economy, and it's left millions of people now without work, let alone the pandemic aside, right? I mean, if you think, for example, that, um, you know, business meetings are going to take place the same way they did in travel, when you now have the capacity to have a Zoom meeting, um, you know, things like that, and included, business lunches, those kinds of things are all going to taper off. So where do those people now go into the economy? And I think that that's where a lot of their headspace is at.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to track what happens in the States as far as people going back to work, right? They're clearly far ahead of us as far as opening up goes post COVID. And to kind of hear the percentage of people that are going back to the office will, I think, translate quite equally to Canada. So I
Mhm.
think in the upcoming months here, we're going to get some interesting data about how many people are actually going back to their brick and mortar offices.
Yeah, and sorry, when I was referring to 9 million, I was referring to the people in the States, not people in Canada.
Sure. Yeah, yeah. Fair. Cool. Well, so far we've just been talking about how kind of rosy everything is and how everything's still going up and pre-sales are blowing out in hours, this kind of thing. And but we're here to talk about how we feel like it is at very near or at the top of the real estate cycle right now. And as agents here, we get a lot of data, and we certainly feel it on the ground as well.
Hmm.
So before the data hits next week, we've obviously looked deeply into what will be presented as the April stats. And this is why, and what we're going to share with you is kind of an early insight as to why we feel things are topping out right now.
Hmm.
So here we go. April, we're on pace for just over 5,000 unique units being sold this month. It's a big number,
Hmm.
yes, and it's third only to last month, March, March, and then of course March of 2016. But do note we are 700 units less than last month.
Yeah, significant.
Yeah, that's a lot, and I honestly think March last month is going to kind of hold the title
Yeah.
for the highest sales volume ever recorded for probably years.
Yeah. I mean, even just anecdotally, the way that we had to go about our business, it was mental. Like
Yeah,
it was bonkers, right? And
sure.
and and I have felt a significant, not pullback, but just the ferocity of people, putting offers together, at the heat of a moment. It's just not happening in the same way, right? And I think that's we're starting to see that in the stats, right? I mean, I want to go through the other stats first before we get into, I think, some of the leading indicators here. But
Hmm.
because it is in pockets right now, it's not across the board. I mean, I've got some clients right now shopping in Langley. We were planning to get into a home that just hit the market yesterday. By day 3, they had 30 booked showings. Right. So depending on the property, depending on the age, there's still those buyers out there who maybe didn't buy something in the last couple of months and they're still sitting on the sidelines. They're watching, right? And they're getting involved in the nice property that comes to market, because generally speaking, a lot of this inventory, some of it's not great, right? So you're still going to see competition for the right property. There's still, it's still, the real estate market is still very hot. Um, but we are seeing behavioral changes, and that's where it starts.
Definitely. Yeah, we've seen a lot of places that would get honestly 20 offers a month 2 months ago. That's down to two or three. A lot of places that are holding offers are not getting any.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
yet at the same time, I think honestly right now a lot of the froth is at the lower end of the market.
Mm.
For example, we offered on something last week, 1 bedroom condo in the Walnut Grove area of Langley. We had to compete against 9 other offers, right? That
Wow.
was a 10 offer scenario.
Yeah.
But that's becoming more and more rare. But again, that was at like a $350,000 price point.
Yeah, we were in one last night at the $500,000 price point. We weren't successful, but again, there were 10 sets of docs that were sent out. Lo and behold, there was an issue with the property right before the offer date, which scared off a bunch of people. But even still, it went into multiples,
Hmm.
right?
There you
And that's
go.
at the $500,000 mark with imperfect property.
Yeah, exactly. So what's going to happen with prices next month as far as the data goes, right? Or sorry, like this month, April, but released next month. Prices are still going up
Yeah.
for sure, right? April is still hot enough, but again, we're seeing early data that's going to show or tell us that it's going to slow down.
Yeah.
Um, the median price, for example, last month 900,000. We're going to see that go up by about $23,000 in the
Wow.
month of April.
Yeah. So still quite strong.
That's
Yeah.
strong. Yeah. The average price is going to be up about 11,000,
Yeah.
somewhere around 1.215 for April. And then HPI, we don't know. I mean, it flew last month at like 39,000 average. It was
It's
way
bonkers.
too much.
Yeah.
I'm guessing, predicting somewhere around 15 to 20,000 increase in HPI. Still
Right.
really, really big numbers,
Yeah.
but slowing, right? The
Yeah.
pace of appreciation rate is slowing.
Well, that's the story to note here, right? I
Mm.
mean, the numbers are they're still very strong numbers, but um, yeah, I think you're starting to see the price stabilization curve start to take place here, right? Will there be a correction or a pullback? Hard to say at this point. I still think there's enough activity in the market that it'll plateau and kind of hold. Um, and that'll be for nice property too. I mean, again, this nice property thing in Vancouver is a thing. Anytime nice property hits the market, people are going to try and buy it, right? So, is it priced well? Are you reasonable with your expectations and all that kind of stuff, right? Because to think that your property is now going to go $400,000 over the list price, I think is, that kind of thought process is out the window.
Yeah, well put, and good insights into what to expect in the upcoming months here. So let's finish this off on the two most important pieces of data that we're watching that are truly indicating the market is shifting.
Mm.
Uh, April of 2021 here, we're on track for about 8,300 new listings. That
Ooh,
is an all-time record,
ooh,
just beating out last month. So we'll
right.
see where the dust settles, but it's right in around what happened last month. I think it'll eclipse it just slightly.
Even still, even if it doesn't, I mean, we're down 700 units from
That's
last
it.
month, right? So it's the swing
Exactly.
point in any case, right? It's a lot of people getting maybe a little late to the party here, is what we're seeing.
Mm-hmm. So that, of course, is increase in listings and the decrease in sales. I think we labeled it last week, but yeah, here comes the inventory.
Yeah.
As of today, we're recording this on Friday, April 30th. GVRD just passed 11,000 active units inventory.
Yeah. So that's a lot of people hearing about all of these properties selling for over list and them wanting to get in the party, but it has an adverse effect. It has an inverse relationship, right? All of a sudden you add supply to the marketplace, price is going to soften. Buyers can choose from multiple different properties now. And that's happening. That is absolutely happening. And it is being reflected really in the days on market, right? I think that's a huge piece here. Last month we were averaging 8 days on market, which is your typical, 7 days on the market, see people through, get offers, sold, bang, right? Now we're looking at 22 days, and that's more than double the amount of time.
Yeah, it's almost triple the days on market. And that coupled with what ultimately ended up being a 15% increase in inventory from
Mm,
March.
mm.
We went from 9,500 to 11,000. Those are two very telling data points that say things are about to slow down.
And you probably won't hear that for some time if you're listening to or reading the media, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because right now they're selling a different story. But it's coming, right? There's going to be a bit of a lull coming here. Again, like we talked about, there's still very strong sales data here, right? So nothing to be concerned about, but definitely not seeing the feverish pace that we were seeing beforehand. We're starting to see this pullback now.
I think another indicator too, and one that we see as agents, is for the first time in about a year, this week, got about 5 or 6 agent emails talking about price reductions,
Mm-hmm.
right? Units that have been sitting, sellers are motivated. They're getting that sense that things are shifting as well, and they're dropping 40, 50, 60, 100K, depending on, price point. But honestly, I hadn't seen a price reduction email in a year, probably. So
Yeah.
it is shifting. And maybe we talk about, what buyers and sellers can expect or should plan for
Mm.
in the upcoming months with this happening, right? Because the data is telling this. What are we advising our clients right now?
Well, yeah. I mean, I think if you're a buyer and you have time on your side, I think you want, well, again, I'm still far more of a fan of your time in the market than timing the market. But right now we've just seen a huge increase in price, especially over the last 6 months. So it may make sense for some of this price stabilization to take effect. You might even see a small pullback, and that might be a great time to buy because interest rates are still going to be low. They're still low for some time now. So I still think you're going to see appreciation. I still think over the long run, things are going to climb in price. I just don't think it's going to be at the same velocity that we've been seeing in the last 6 months. And thank God for that.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think on the sell side, definitely not a time to be greedy. Do not think if you list now, you're going to get March's numbers.
Yeah.
Um, Depending, of course, on product type and location. But it's pricing now is going to become very critical to selling. If you are looking for a quicker sale, right? If you're okay to not sit on the market and worry about a price reduction later.
Yeah.
Um,
I think this is the time to have the conversation about, you know, a month ago, it was about setting the new price point, right? Every time a new listing hit, it could set a new record. Now that has kind of hit its top. And I think now you're going to start to see the market be more about the next sale, not necessarily about the next sale price. Right.
yeah.
And that's the mentality that I think a lot of sellers should get into now. It's look, there's been a pump. You know, prices have gone up. Be reasonable about your take, and be smart about where you're going to put your next buy, right?
Yeah.
Because it's really something to think about right now. Where you're going to put the
Definitely.
money.
Definitely. If you're a buyer and you've been maybe had that buyer fatigue, maybe you got outbid 5, 6, 7 times and you just are done with it, you may want to consider looking at the market again in the upcoming months because there are pockets right now where you can get in without competing.
Yep.
And yeah, again, just as long as you're buying for the long term, you will weather the upcoming downturn in the cycle because it is coming, and we will see prices decrease in the upcoming months. I don't think they're going to drop more than 10 or 15%. And then they will swing back up. But again, for whatever is right for you, we're happy to have that conversation and kind of advise accordingly.
Yeah, and I mean, looking back on uh, just looking back at the history of these cycles, you can tell, don't be alarmed if you just bought something and you feel like it's going to all of a sudden detract in value. That's why we always recommend a minimum 5 years being in the marketplace, right? But that aside, in 5 years your property is going to be worth more money, so long as interest rates remain on the lower side and the economy continues to recover the way it's supposed to.
Perfect. Thank you so much for listening, everybody, and watching. We always appreciate it. And like Ryan said, if you can subscribe and follow us, it is hugely appreciated.